Welcome to the... I'm your host, and in this video, we're breaking down after Mark's trip to hell and back, we finally get the long-awaited reunion between him and his father. Nolan has come back to Earth to recruit him for the Viltrumite War, but in doing so, he's forced to confront his past mistakes. This gives us a deeper look into a lot of the supporting cast of Invincible before taking an explosive turn into one of the biggest fights that we've seen in the show so far. Yes, even more insane than Invincible's fight with Conquest last season. As always though, this episode's packed with Easter eggs and references from the comics, but it also includes a lot of new things for the series. Throughout this video, we'll be recapping the story and also breaking down the differences from the comics. I'll also be looking terrible. Someone on the videos last week was like, you need to fucking exercise. I was like, what mate? I'm not, this isn't skin mate. The costume is not zipped up at the back. I bought an extra small on Amazon. That was all that was available. We had to make it work at the last minute. I'm very sorry. But yeah, the cape's covering it now, but there's nothing zipped up there. Either way, before we start, if you want to catch up on the source material for this episode and see how it was adapted for the entry, then check out the last few pages of Invincible Returns, issue 71 and issue 72. They're great issues and a good on-ramp in the comics where you can probably start reading without having worked through all the issues up until that point. Either way, we start off the episode with the long-awaited reunion of Invincible and Omni-Man. Along with Alan, he's come to recruit Mark for the Viltrumite War. We also get a hilarious scene of Alan the alien showing Eve holograms of his pet cat from the third episode of season 2. Apparently it has 2 buttholes as well, which little bit of trivia for you there. Alan also stresses to Eve that while he knows it's a big ask, they basically have no chance of winning the war. Now this quick little scene is brand new for the show, but I really love how it kind of fills her in on the situation immediately. In the comics, she's kind of just expected to go along with everything, but this fleshes out her acceptance a lot more. She also questions whether Nolan's really changed, but Alan is of course the kind of best cheerleader to show that he has. We then see Mark and Nolan having their father and son reunion in the sky. They've obviously, often flew off to have father and son chats, and this just kind of brings things full circle from those other ones. It's here that Nolan tells Mark about the Viltrumites' plan of rebuilding their numbers by banging their way through the galaxy. However, Mark isn't so quick to forgive, and he reminds Nolan of all the people who've died because of him. Mark is still living with that guilt, and he just can't wipe that all away. Nolan promises that he will spend the rest of his life making up for those mistakes, and while Invincible doesn't necessarily believe him just yet, he realizes he doesn't really have a choice either way. If the Coalition loses the war, Earth is absolutely screwed and Mark is just stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now this is another new scene for the show, but I think it's a much needed addition. In the comics, we see Omni-Man and Alan come back to Earth in Invincible Returns, but we never actually see them recruiting Mark. Nolan basically just shows up and we cut to him explaining the war to Eve at dinner, having already agreed to join. Being able to see this conversation play out though not only gives us more insight into Mark's thought process, but it also forces Omni-Man to confront all the terrible things he's done. In the comics, he never really has to face the consequences of his actions or reflect on how bad of a guy he was. It's just kind of like, yeah, I did some messed up stuff, but I'm good now, so we're all cool. I think this is a central theme for the episode though, so we'll circle back to this a few times. I love these added moments though that make Omni-Man feel the pain he's inflicted on others and make him work for his redemption. We then see Omni-Man owning up to more of his mistakes as he prepares to apologize to Debbie. Mark says that this is a really bad idea and that he needs to think about whether he's doing this for her or himself. However, Nolan is adamant that it's something that he needs to do and that Debbie deserves it. We can also see that when Mark and Eve leave, the sun is setting, but when Nolan comes to the door, it's completely turned to night. There's nothing major there, it's not a massive detail, but I think it's just a nice little touch that shows, yeah, he did really spend a lot of time thinking about whether he should confront Debbie. He even almost goes back on his decision when ringing the doorbell, but he's met by Debbie at the door. And I did even wonder if she knew he was there the whole time and has been preparing herself to face him. We then see Nolan owning up to everything, saying that he knows his apology is selfish and empty, but that he's genuinely sorry and that Debbie made him more of a human than he was a Viltrumite. However, Debbie is not willing to let Nolan off easy and tells him to fuck off. Oof! She just lays into him about how he just can't say sorry and make everything better. It reminds him of all the death and destruction he caused, not only in the world, but also in his personal life. She then starts punching his chest, breaking her hand in the process and leaving a blood stain right over Nolan's heart. This symbolizes not only how Nolan is genuinely hurt by seeing Debbie in so much pain, but also like a physical representation of how he's forever stained by the blood of all the people he's killed and the lives that he's destroyed. Now, we do get a similar scene in the comics from issue 71, but it's literally just one page and plays out much differently. In the comics, Nolan deliberately avoids meeting Debbie when he first comes to Earth, and he just randomly decides to pop in a couple pages later. Nolan also doesn't really apologize for anything and just says he didn't mean what he said before and gives a single "I'm sorry." He never mentions or acknowledges any of the other terrible things he's done, such as murdering the Guardians or destroying Thraxa. Debbie also doesn't really have much to say in the comics either. She just cries and says she doesn't believe him to the point she literally only gets 2 word bubbles. Here we see Debbie truly get to express herself and hold Nolan accountable. She's rightfully pissed and gets to release her rage and grief. You know, we aren't just brushing past it with a shot of her looking devastated and crying. There's actually a really great shot here as well that I think perfectly represents the differences between Debbie in the show and the comics, as we can see her facial expression is pure rage and not sadness. Now, we've talked about this a lot in the previous season breakdown episodes, but I feel like the show just really gives Debbie a lot more autonomy over her own decisions than she has in the source material. I just love these changes to her character that really flesh her out as an individual, and it gives her an actual role outside of just being Invincible's mum. The hand smashing thing especially, I think that's just going to be one of those things that sticks with me for a long time, and it's such a big iconic part of the argument. And then, even her asking if she's still his pet and him saying,
"You never were."
It all just builds off some of the major moments and has the characters confronting things seasons in the making. Okay, so Invincible is absolutely packed with unforgettable moments, and memories are often triggered by certain scents. Just like Omni-Man reminisces on the past when he sees something familiar, the same thing can happen to us with smell. Scents, aftershaves and perfumes can take you back to a time in your life and also lift your mood and make you feel more confident. I've been using Scentbird for over a year now, and it's been an amazing way to get some incredible fragrances without my wallet feeling like it's been hit by Conquest. Every month they send you these perfectly closed vials of designer and niche fragrances that you can pick personally from their massive 900 plus collection. And the best thing is, it's all for a fraction of the usual bottle price. They come in these slick compact cases with a built-in travel lock, so you don't have to worry about your fragrance exploding in your luggage. I've just gone away to Centre Parcs and London for the week, and I took one of these because, let's be honest, you don't need a big bottle for a 2-week trip. Think Mark! With Scentbird, you're not locked into the same scent for years, and you get to test drive fragrances without committing to a full bottle. You'll also get these cool little info cards with every vial that break down everything you need to know about the fragrance. This month, I picked up Royal Charter by English Laundry, which has a sea salt, sage and driftwood scent. I also got Awakened Distill by Toomey, which has a black lavender and cypress scent. On top of that, I got Omni-Man by Oman Jane, and Cool Leather by Joseph Arbaud. And every month, Scentbird drops new fragrances of the month, so there's always something fresh to discover. If you want to start your own scent journey, they're running an amazing deal where you get 55% off your first month when you use my code HEAVY2 or scan the QR code on screen right now. That means you can try your first full fragrance from Scentbird for just $8.97, and your next month will be $17.95. Again, the code is HEAVY2 or scan the QR code on screen for 55% off your first month. We then cut to trouble in the city as the Walking Dread is causing mayhem in the streets. This is an obvious homage to Kirkman's other famous series, The Walking Dead, and it's a character that we've previously seen as a member of the Order. However, the hulking zombie is quickly stopped by Tech Jacket, who's a girl now!
You're the fucking man!
Nope.
Now, this is obviously a massive change, and in the comics, Tech Jacket's a boy named Zach Thompson who finds a suit of armor from the Goldarians and basically ends up becoming a superhero. He's basically like a cross between Blue Beetle, Iron Man and Green Lantern. The character also has an AI voiceover in their armor, which is a clear nod to Jarvis. Now, we have seen Tech Jacket before during the Invincible War, and during that, some fans theorized that they could be making them a girl for the show. So theory confirmed, you guys, well done. He's named Zoe instead of Zach, and I do wonder how this is going to go down with fans. Now, I can already hear the comments and criticisms about this. I have been on the internet before, but I actually think this change might allow them to develop the character a bit more. In saying that as well, I just want to clarify, I don't claim to be any expert on Tech Jacket, but him being a female, at least for the purpose of Invincible, does not change the character's role from the comics. In those, he literally just pops in as backup for Invincible and the Coalition, and he gets shown fighting in a couple of panels, but nothing really past that beyond developing a friendship with Alan. There's even a hilarious panel in issue 78 where Tech Jacket catches up to Invincible and he's just like, yeah, the war's over, now fuck off, and he leaves. In the Tech Jacket comics, he does have a relationship with a Goldarian princess named Lynn, but they're physically incompatible due to her alien physiology. And she ends up with a girl and fellow Goldarian, and I keep mispronouncing that word, I apologise. But yeah, having Tech Jacket being a girl doesn't really change that either, and could actually lead to them ending up together if they decided to show that storyline or give Tech her own show. If you know the comics as well, then you'll know that Shrinking Ray's a guy there too, but the series has managed to flesh her out a lot more by making her a woman. And not killing her as well. And giving her a shrinking relationship. Thank you. I did wonder if this change is also because the Invincible war crew in the comics is very much a boys club, so having Tech be a girl adds a bit more dynamics and diversity. I wouldn't be surprised as well if Eve ends up showing up too, which she doesn't in the comics. But we're all about girl power at this channel. As you mentioned with both Eve and Debbie though, many of the female characters in the Invincible comics are mostly there to serve the male storylines, which Kirkman has actually openly admitted he regrets. He said the way he wrote a lot of his female characters early in his career in both Invincible and The Walking Dead is something that he's been open about, and this has clearly offered him the chance to change that. In an interview with Comic Beat, he said that though he thinks Invincible is a very diverse comic, they wanted to change some things for the series and thought that the story was richer for it, with it being a more rounded experience. But yeah, it's going to possibly be a big talking point, and I am interested to see how this will change or enhance Tech Jacket's involvement in the series as it has for Eve and Debbie. We do get a hint at this later on as well, which we'll talk about more on in just a bit, but back to Girl Tech Jacket versus The Walking Dread. It's an awesome fight sequence though between the two, where Tech takes down Dread pretty easily, and it's also set to the same song that was playing when Mark and Oliver fought the dragon in episode 3. In our earlier videos, we also discussed how the thing on the suit helmet is a lot bigger than in the comics. Here we see why that's the case, as it sort of unleashes a powerful arc reactor type blast. This ultimately takes out the villain, and we then see as Tech Jacket returns to her ship with her dad. It's at this point that she's recruited by Alan for the war, which is almost a direct shot from issue 71. One last note on Tech as well, she's voiced by Zoe Dutch in the show, and her AI is actually LeVar Burton, who you might know as Geordie LaForge from Star Trek. Absolutely amazing choice. I love a good voice actor Easter egg. We then meet back up with Debbie, where her and Mark talk about him leaving to go and fight in an alien space war. While she's clearly upset and doesn't want him to go, Debbie gives Mark her blessing, saying that she understands that he has to. However, she makes him promise that he'll come back. The tender moment is then cut short though when Oliver pops in and he's brought up to speed about what's going on. He's obviously pissed that Nolan came back to Earth and didn't come to see him, but hey, at least he didn't try and beat you to death like he did with his other son. Oliver then gets even more pissed when Mark tries to tell him that he has to stay back to protect Earth. But to Oliver, he deserves to make his own choice. To Oliver, he couldn't save his first mum, and he's not going to let the same thing happen to Debbie. Now this honestly took me by surprise, but it just further shows how much Oliver has developed a love for humanity. Realizing that she can't stop him and that he's right, Debbie agrees to let him go, and the three share a family hug. To Clementine by Sarah Jaffe, we then get a montage of them having what could be the Last Supper. This is another new addition for the show, and in the comics, Mark tells Oliver he's staying behind, but Omni-Man changes his mind on the next page after meeting with Debbie. He tells him to pack his bags for space, which he's totally psyched about. Hopefully he packs some nice clothes too, and checks out our merch store right below the video. There we've got this Dinosaurus inspired tee, the Omni-Man one, and also stuff like our Donald one and our Battle Beast one as well. There's lots of massive discounts on them too, so get yourself some shirts if you want to feel... Anyway, it's great to see Oliver have more of a say over his own actions. I also love this added element of Oliver wanting to save Debbie because of the guilt that he feels for the death of his mother. While Oliver was just a baby at the time, we learned last season that due to the Thraxans' short lifespan, Oliver can remember every second of his life. So the death of his mother and home planet isn't just some story to him. It's one of his core memories. I really, really love this addition to the show, and it gives Oliver a lot more depth than in the comics. There, he basically just wants to punch bad guys and be like Omni-Man, but here he has a tragic backstory that fuels his motivation. This is also another great example of how the show brings Debbie into the fold and involves her in this massive decision. In the comics, we don't even see the boys say goodbye to her, and they literally just run off to space. Honestly, don't even know if Debbie's aware that they're gone, because yeah, no one even tells her about the war or anything. We just kinda hit the ground running. It's just a beautiful scene of them all together, emphasizing everything that Mark and Oliver are fighting to protect, and having them all come to this decision together. Except for Paul. We still don't trust him, and I hope Omni-Man kills him. But one small detail that I love about this sweet family moment is that they're sat there eating Korean food. Now this may seem dumb, but it's just one of those small details that they didn't really have to include, but they did it to represent Mark and Debbie's culture. This was ambiguous in the comics, but Kirkman solidified Mark as Korean in the show. Again, tying back to his comments about adding a bit more diversity. Also, notice how Debbie's sitting at the head of the table and is left all alone after the dinner's over. This symbolizes that Debbie's the one keeping everyone together, but at the end of the day, she's the one who loses the most and has to face these things on her own. We then meet back up with Omni-Man as he works his 12-step program. He's trying to make amends to all the people that he's hurt, and it's here that he goes to see Art the tailor. However, Art is far more concerned about Omni-Man's costume from the Coalition than his past mistakes, and the two just shoot the shit over a couple of beers. We also get some insight into why Nolan's avoiding Oliver. He says he doesn't want to screw him up the way he did with Mark. You know, like the whole trying to kill him thing. Which again shows how he's really been thinking about what Mark said about his apologies being selfish. Nolan also asks about Paul, but Art says he's actually a really cool dude. Oh, come on, Art, don't fucking fall for it. However, despite reminiscing on the good old days, Art cuts the meeting short and Nolan tries to apologize for everything he's done, even offering Art the opportunity to make him a new suit. Basically like saying we can just go back to the way things were. But Art isn't so quick to forgive and forget, and he tells Nolan that he can't make him a new suit because he only dresses heroes. Ooh. We can see that it really hurts Nolan though, and he just flies off. This leaves Art to let out a huge sigh of relief, as he probably thought Omni-Man would for sure kill him for refusing to make him a suit. It emphasizes though how much Omni-Man's actions hurt the people closest to him, and that they won't just let him forget it now that he's decided he wants to be good. Because there's still potentially that evil murderer inside of him. Hell, he killed the Guardians and they were his friends, so you can totally understand why everyone is still a little bit on their guard. Now this is another major deviation from the comics, as Nolan never goes to see Art or apologizes for anything that he did, other than like his brief apology to Debbie. In the comics, Art is actually really upset when learning that Nolan came back to Earth and didn't see him, and we get a devastating panel of him asking Eve why Debbie didn't tell him, and then just walking off with his head down. Despite everything Omni-Man had done, Art in the comics is one of the only people who never lost faith in Nolan. He even told Mark in Invincible Returns that Nolan's a good man and the bad stuff he did was the real act. To Art, he was simply trying to be something he thought he should be, but wasn't really deep down. We saw this scene referenced in the beginning of the last episode, but there Art acknowledged all the death and destruction left by Omni-Man and didn't try to defend him. Having Art turn against Nolan in the show is just a major way the series is forcing Omni-Man to truly face the consequences of the devastation he left behind. This creates an even greater parallel to Mark's own journey on his way back to redemption. You can also see that what Art says genuinely hurts Nolan, and he doesn't really know how to process it. So this is why he just flies away. It's similar how he ran off on Debbie after she told him off, because Nolan has never been faced with a problem that he couldn't solve through just punching it or exiting away from it. Every issue on planet Veltrum is dealt with by brutal violence, and when faced with any kind of moral conflict, the characters just fight to the death or leave. Kind of like when his dad saved him when he was younger and his mum was like, right, well, I'm off for you, so I'm leaving you all. They just cannot deal with shades of grey, and it all has to be black and white. But yeah, they just punch people until the decision's made there in either death or exhaustion. But with the humans though, Nolan genuinely cares about them and thus doesn't want to punch their heads off. So he just runs away, completely unable to handle it. It's kind of like what he did when fleeing to planet Thraxa, or turning against the Veltrumite Empire, or fleeing to Telescara with Alan, and I keep fucking that up as well. We then see Mark and Eve having their last night together as they reminisce about everything they've gone through. Mark reassures Eve that no matter what, everything will turn out okay because they love each other. Oh, will it though? Eve also mentions how she appreciates Mark's belief in the endless power of their love. This is also a subtle way of Eve foreshadowing basically the entire premise of Invincible. We will see much later how true this statement is, but if you want some spoilers, we've got a Thrag video explaining his entire story in the comics where we kind of touch upon this theme, and it will be made much clearer there. Yes, I am tricking you into going to watch another video. Mark also tries to ask Eve about what she was going to tell him before Nolan and Alan showed up, but Eve decides to keep the pregnancy to herself and just enjoy her last night with Mark. Now we do get a similar scene to this in issue 71, but it's expanded much more here in the show. In the comic, Mark basically spends the whole time defending his decision to go and grappling with the gravity of the situation. There, Eve doesn't want to talk about it at all and just wants to be with Mark. The entire conversation is focused on Mark though, and it doesn't really acknowledge Eve's feelings at all, except for showing her crying. This is another great way that the show is giving Eve more equal footing in their relationship, and it lets her have a say in these situations. I think it nicely plays into how women like Eve and Debbie are heavily affected by the actions of their partners, and though they don't get as much say, they're often the ones who are left to pick up the pieces. There's a big chance that Mark could die in space or on a planet with his guts hanging out, and Eve would be left all alone with the baby. Even though she believes that Mark will survive, there's still a reality that their child might grow up without a father. We can also see this in the very next scene where Oliver and Mark say their goodbyes to Debbie. As you mentioned, this is another new scene for the show, but it shows women are the ones holding everything together for these heroes. With Debbie literally holding Oliver and Mark together, making them promise they'll look out for each other before leaving. Oliver even hugs Paul and he tells the boys to give him hell, which honestly was kind of sweet. But I'm still not letting him off so easily. You were in 7 issues, Paul. What's your game here? We then get a great little nod to a classic line from the series.
Mark, how do we breathe in space?
That's the neat thing.
How do I breathe in space?
That's the neat thing. You don't.
Once on board the Venture, Oliver then gets his long-awaited reunion with Nolan, but it doesn't go as he hoped. Omni-Man is pissed that he's there, and he orders Mark to take him back. However, Oliver stands up for himself again and tells Nolan how he's responsible for the death of his homeworld and that he has no right to tell him what to do. Fucking cucked him, dude. This once again just twists the knife of Omni-Man's guilt even further, and he tries to explain himself to Mark. He says that he doesn't want to save Oliver from the war, but from himself, and that he's made too many mistakes to truly redeem himself. However, while Mark doesn't give him the forgiveness he's looking for, he does show his dad that he's got some compassion. He tells him how Oliver idolizes him, which is why he still wears the symbol of the O, and that it doesn't stand for Oliver, which I thought was a fucking cracking line. But yeah, this could be Nolan's second chance, and this calls back to what Alan told him about how the Scourge virus could have been a second chance for the Viltrumites. The entire civilization was completely almost destroyed, and they could have rebuilt from that and done something positive. Instead though, they chose to become even more brutal. Now though, Omni-Man has to face that same decision to either accept what he's done and take advantage of his second chance, or double down and resort back to using his powers to force people into submission. Not only does this explore Nolan's redemption a lot deeper than in the comics, but it also gives Oliver a bit more of a role here. In the comics, he's just absolutely psyched to be there and has 0 issues with Nolan. Similar to Eve and Debbie, Oliver's storyline in the comic is very much dependent on Mark and Nolan. They never really get a say in what goes on and are just kind of along for the ride for a lot of the series. He does get a bit more to do later on in the comics, but it's still very much dependent on progressing Mark's story and not necessarily his own. You also see another example of this in a moment where he meets Tech Jacket, and there's some obvious sparks there, which would be a great way to further flesh out both characters and give them their own character arcs that they didn't get in the comics. The Venture then heads off into the stars with a clear nod to Star Trek beyond the uniforms and character designs.
Engage.
Engage.
We also get a brief scene showing that the GDA has been fully aware of Omni-Man's return, and Cecil breathes a sigh of relief when seeing them leave the planet. He says that this is the first time in 20 years that Earth's been free of Viltrumites, which is a good thing. But he also acknowledges that it might be a bad thing as Earth has lost its heaviest hitters and they're now more vulnerable than ever. We then get a montage of everyone just kind of chilling on the ship as they make their way to the Coalition. We have Alan training Oliver to fight as he avoids Nolan, and Nolan sitting with his grief. He reminisces on some sweet moments with Debbie, but no one really gets a moment to dwell on things as the Venture's attacked and completely blown up, just like the Enterprise in every single Star Trek movie. Luckily, everyone's able to survive, including the crew, and Mark finds Oliver floating unconscious amongst the rubble. They soon see what really destroyed their ship, and we get the return of none other than Conquest. He's come back for his revenge on Mark, and is someone who will try to stop the Coalition's war before it starts. This all plays out pretty much the same way in the comic at the end of issue 71, but it happens a lot faster. There it goes down within the first 2 days of their journey, and we never see the group's little bonding session or Nolan struggling with his trauma. This also brings us to the beginning of issue 72. Now, while Mark is frozen in shock at Conquest still being alive, Oliver immediately charges at him as Invincible is attacked by Lucan. He's got personal beef with Mark and Nolan and was one of the Viltrumites they fought on Thraxa back in season 2, episode 4. Oliver then immediately gets bitch slapped by Conquest, but he comes back to give him the 1-2 combo. He actually holds his own and redeems himself from being knocked out by the same slap in their first encounter. You can also notice that Oliver is also using the new moves that Alan taught him a minute ago, such as keeping his elbows in tighter and hitting Conquest's ribs with Bruce Lee type speed. However, it's still not even close enough to stand against Conquest, and he starts crushing Oliver's head until he's saved by Nolan. This is all while Mark beats the shit out of Lucan, with Alan in tech jacket trying to fend off the other Viltrumite soldier. In the comic, this is General Craig, but here it's just your average Viltrumite, with a mullet and some mutton chops. The entire scene is pretty much ripped straight from the comics though, with only some minor differences, which is mainly things like Oliver putting a quick beating on Conquest, who just swats him away like he did in their first fight. Conquest also gives a very chilling speech to Mark in the source material before attacking. He says that he's going to kill Mark last so that he has to watch everyone else die. It's also a quick panel in the comic showing how terrified Nolan is of Conquest, which we don't get here, but I kind of wish they kept. It's a small nitpick, but I just think those two panels really sell how strong and terrifying that Conquest is. As Nolan faces off against him, he calls him a traitor and gloats about how lucky he feels to be able to kill him, which is almost word for what he tells him in the comic. However, Nolan is then saved by Mark and Conquest taunts him about Eve. He says that he can't wait to taste her blood again, and this causes Mark to completely lose it while everyone fights for their lives against the other Viltrumites. Also, the dialogues are all done psychically as they don't have any sound in space, but this is something that Alan's able to bring in. It's just an absolutely brutal space battle though, and probably one of the best big fights that we've gotten in the show so far. The keyword here as well being so far. However, while the other heroes barely hold their own, the Viltrumites call in some reinforcements. We then see an army of alien soldiers swarm out their ship, and these are most likely the Kresh. These are the alien army they hired to destroy the Geldarians that Nolan mentioned in episode 2. We then see Oliver getting his ass handed to him by Lucan, but he's saved again by Omni-Man. However, being his first time in space, Oliver runs out of air and Omni-Man sends him to a nearby planet in order to get a breath and return to the fight. They kind of referenced that before with Oliver's offhand joke about how they can breathe in space, but just a reminder, they actually have to hold their breath, and Oliver just sucks at it. We then get back to the rematch between Conquest and Invincible when Mark starts taunting him about his confession to him last season of him being lonely and just wanting friends and subscribers, which you can correct. I love how Conquest says that he told him that in confidence though, and yeah, I thought that line was a nice addition and absolutely hilarious. In the comics, Conquest tells Mark about him being imprisoned by Cecil, and while he doesn't do that here, it throws Mark off a bit because he knows Cecil lied to him. In the show, Mark could probably just put the pieces together, but it's an interesting thing to leave out, and I do wonder if it will come back into play when Mark gets back to Earth. And spoiler alert there. The fight is then cut short again when Conquest notices Oliver flying to a nearby planet and he goes after him. I love the way Conquest just appears behind him as well, and it's kind of like one of those me and my problems memes. Crashing into the planet, Mark starts choking Conquest as he just starts laying into him. Thrashing each other all across the surface, Mark desperately holds on. We also quickly cut back to space with Alan, Tech Jacket and Nolan fighting off the other Viltrumites in their army. Nolan then leaves the fight to go after Mark and Oliver, leaving Alan and Tech Jacket to make their escape from the Viltrumites. But we will circle back to that later. Back with Invincible and Conquest, we see Mark is still holding on for dear life. He's trying to choke the life out of the villain as he flies in the planet, and Conquest is basically desperate to make Mark let go. However, Mark only tightens his grip as Conquest pummels him and just tosses him around like a ragdoll. We then see Mark going into full-on savage mode as he bites Conquest's thumb off. All that stuff about Eve really set him off, and it shows that Mark is actually fighting for something, whereas Conquest is just fighting for fun. Like, if you play a sports game and you're really set on winning, you'll probably push harder than the guy who is just there to have a good time. But ultimately, this is what pushes him to go further. I love how, as he tries to get back on his feet, he tightens his grip even more. Absolutely insane, and while a lot of this fight comes straight from issue 72, this particular moment is brand new for the show. It's just a really cool thing, but if I can put my over-analysing hat on for a minute, I feel like this is also meant to symbolise how Mark has fully given into his dark side. All season he's been trying to hold back, but him doing this is definitely not that. Him biting Conquest's thumb off could also be a reference to Sinister Mark, who's one of Invincible's evil variants. He actually ended up becoming 100% cannibal, and this could be showing how easily Mark could slip into going down the same path. With Conquest on the ropes, he makes a last-ditch attempt to save himself and give Mark the classic Viltrumite gut punch. He then proceeds to rip out his guts for a disturbingly long time as Invincible still somehow holds on. Conquest's eyes slowly roll back and his legs go limp, which ends the fight. And whew, holy shit, that was fucking hard to watch. The final scene is almost shot for shot from the comics, but seeing it play out and hearing the gross sounds of Mark's guts falling out and gasping for air, whew, goddamn, man. In the comics, Mark also mentions how Conquest was able to get a breath when he first came for Oliver, meaning that he's at full strength, and it just gives you a better idea of how long Mark had to hold on to him for him to run out of breath. And I'm running out of breath myself saying that. We then get another near exact shot from the comics of the destruction left on the planet by their fight, and we hear the haunting silence of the aftermath. We then see Nolan and Oliver find Mark clinging to life, lying next to Conquest's dead body, just as they do in the final pages of issue 72. The fight in the show is a lot longer, but almost all these major moments are exact recreations of Ryan Artley's work from the comic, which is absolutely stunning as well. This is just a great example of how the series elevates these same moments and makes them even more impactful for both fans of the comics and those experiencing it for the first time. We then cut to Talia and the Venture crew reporting to Thetis, but he's super chill about the whole thing. He's confident that Alan and the others will survive and says that it's time to start the war. Now this is a bit different from the comics, as Thetis is pissed at the potential loss of his strongest soldiers, and he stresses how important they are to the war. This brings us to the end of the episode though, but not before we meet back up with Alan and Tech Jacket for the post-credit scene. There we see that they escape the Viltrumites by Tech Jacket using her armor to create a dome that has attached to their ship, which she mentioned she saw in a movie and is obviously referencing Star Wars when the Millennium Falcon pulls off the same thing in Empire. We also see that they have absolutely zero plans and are basically just hoping they don't end up on the planet Viltrum. We then leave them to pass the time with some video games, and this is another scene directly from the comics in issue 73, with just a bit of extra banter between Alan and Tech Jacket. And yeah, after all that fucking insane action, I just needed to de-stress and end on a lighter note. Now, I know like in all the breakdowns we've said things are going to get a lot worse for Mark, but even I didn't realize how bad it would get. Like, I was not prepared for how brutal that rematch was, and I knew it was coming. Absolutely devastating way to end the episode though, and it sets us up for the war to come. Despite how many times I've read the comics, it still blows my mind how they're able to stay so true to the source material while also adding in so many new elements that then enhance the story. While I love the insane superhero punchy fight stuff, the real strength of this episode for me was all the added character work that they gave to pretty much everyone. We're just taking a deeper look into the supporting cast of Invincible and giving them their moment that they weren't able to get in the comics. Especially like for Nolan and his redemption, which is glossed over so quickly in the books. But I love how Kirkman and the team are just torturing him a bit in the show because, yeah, he definitely deserves it. But huge thank you for sticking through the video, and huge shout outs to our resident Invincible expert researcher TJ for getting all the comic references together and analysing these changes for the show. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts below, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of our Invincible Season 4 breakdowns. If you want to follow us on Instagram as well and keep up to date with all our updates, make sure that you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Huge thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring the video. Go and grab that 55% off right now with code HEAVY2 or by scanning the QR code and start building your own legendary scent collection. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos like this every single week, and if you click the join button you get at least one big breakdown a week before everyone else. Right now I think we have For Your Eyes only, and maybe Face Off as well, but if you don't want that then I will not hold it against you. Thank you for all your support in general, and yeah, if you want to watch something else, that's on screen right now. Without the way though, thank you so much for sitting through this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.